Kia ora, and welcome to day 3 of the Beer Jug Advent Drink Along. I'm Luke.
I'm Joe.
And I'm Jim from Fermentation, and you are about to drink Meli, a barrel fermented honey pale.
Beautiful. Don't forget to use your microphone.
Oh yeah. I probably should use that, shouldn't I?
So, Jim, thanks so much. Thanks so much for getting splattered in beautiful beer there.
Yeah, no worries.
Awesome that you could be up to drink this with us in beautiful sunny Auckland. But you guys aren't based in Auckland, hey?
No. So we're based in Nelson, Tasman region. So we make beer and wine under the same label. For you that know Nelson, it's a beautiful sunny area, one of the sunniest places in the country, and filled with, it's a real fruit basket, so it's filled with different hops and malts, and, fruits and nuts and citrus. So we're really just trying to make a bunch of beers that are sort of celebrating the region that we're in, the fruit basket that we're in.
And bees?
And bees, yeah. My partner Lauren is a beekeeper and sort of the main brewer behind Fermentation. So we've got some a couple of beehives floating around some manuka branches at the top of our vineyard.
Sounds like a halcyon paradise. Well, cheers to that.
Hey, cheers.
Cheers.
So brewed Lauren and yourself.
That's
So
correct.
did you start off with wine or start off with making beer?
We sort of tried to start them at the same time.
Yep.
So we first moved back here in January 2020.
Yep.
I was working for a winery in the Willamette Valley in Oregon, and Lauren was working for a brewery called Migration Brewing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so she was working there as a brewer, and we moved back here because we've been working in the beer and wine industry for the last sort of 10 years, and we thought we're ready to sort of start our own thing. So as soon as we moved there in January, we found a small vineyard, and we bought a brewery from Waiheke Island that was sort of half built.
Yeah.
And then sort of during that lockdown period, we started making wine and building our brewery. So I think we actually didn't get the brewery finished until maybe November of 2020. Yeah, and started putting things to barrel, and been going ever since.
Yeah. And what's your release schedule been like?
We try and release maybe 3 or 4 beers a year. It's more, we sort of have a different approach to the brewery sort of schedule than most other breweries. We sort of treat our brewery more like a winery. So we put things to barrel. We let them age in barrel for 4 months, 6 months, 2 years, 3 years, and then throughout the season we're trying all of the different barrels, and then as things are starting to come together and the fireworks really start going in a certain barrel, we'll say what's in season. So it might be nuts, so we'll re-ferment the beer and age it on nuts, or it might be citrus season, so it's got lemon peels and grapefruit peels. It could be just after grape harvest, so we could use the lees of wine, or we could use the pressed grapes and make like a grape ale. So it's more just like a reaction of what's looking good, what's in season, and then letting things age and bottle until everything sort of comes together.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Which is the way beer was, and it's something I love about beer is, and as someone that makes beer, unfortunately for me, I contract brew, so I have a lot of restrictions. I don't have beautiful land and bees and fruit trees and things.
Yeah.
But when possible, it is lovely to work around seasonal produce. And,
Absolutely.
but that's obviously how beer always was when it was farmhouse brewing, and women would brew for the villages, and then industrialization came along a couple of hundred years ago, and then beer got way more connected to just industry and factories as a homogenous product. The Guinness factory, they call it. They don't call it a brewery even, because it's just millions of litres churning out.
Yes.
And you look at something like Budweiser or just any mass-produced lager,
Yeah.
and it's that they use a blend of 14 different hops because it has to taste exactly the same every time.
Yes.
Whereas what I think was wonderful about this product in small batches is that variance, and batches of between hops even and malt, and then when you're using these wonderful adjuncts and additional things,
Yes.
like honey,
Yes,
it
yeah.
doesn't always taste the same, hey?
No, absolutely. I think that you're totally right, and it's nice to have these beers that we can sort of drink, more sort of, who doesn't love just like a nice sort of crisp, sort of consistent lager or something like that, or like a Guinness or something every now and then. Or
Perfectly made, yeah.
Exactly.
Like Guinness, immaculate.
100%. But I think that what we were trying to sort of add to the beer market in New Zealand is just like, let's have something that tastes like a time that has shown, a little bit more sort of patience and a little bit more restraint, and just celebrate what this country has, which is beautiful New Zealand malts, beautiful New Zealand hops, and good fruit and beautiful honey, and that's what we're all about. All New Zealand hops, all New Zealand malts, and using real fruits instead of purees. For a beer, we'll go to an orchard and we'll actually go pick the fruit and ferment the fruit on top of the beer, so there's no purees that have come from the other side of the world or anything. We're trying to be as Kiwiana as we can.
And you taste the difference.
Yeah.
You know when a brewery's made a beer using extracts and flavourings or versus local whole fruit. But it's, I suppose for me, I think of it as similar to McDonald's is incredible, and it's so impressive what they can do compared to a farm to table Michelin starred meal from a great chef. But what's amazing in beer is that you buy a kind of panhead or something from Lion or DB and it's homogenous, and it costs the fucking same.
Right.
As buying a can like this. And it's like, how are you charging $12 for your can? And they're charging $12 for their can. Whereas the love and the labour and the craft and the work, we see it in wine.
Yes.
In wine you have $9 bottles and $9,000 bottles.
Yes.
And it's a thing, I feel like there's a bit of a disconnect in beer because people think of beer as an industrial product. That it would be crazy for a can of beer to be $45.
Sure, yeah, of course.
But it really shouldn't be when you think about you and Lauren picking fruit in the field and tending to your apiary and looking after the bees when they get ill.
Totally. Yeah. No, I think thank you. It is a real labour of love. It is just Lauren and I. It's two of us. It's from brewing the beer to canning or bottling, to packaging, to distribution, to everything, to coming up here and getting to hang out with you two.
We just had a good chat about hand labelling.
Absolutely, absolutely. Put some tunes on. Yeah. But it is a labour of love. It's something that I think if Lauren and I weren't doing the things that we wanted to do with brew fermentation, with the type of beer that we're making and the type of wine that we're making, we're just trying to make people feel something. A good friend of ours who's a winemaker had one of her wines being sort of discredited by a punter, and she sort of gave him a smile and said, "Hey man, as long as you felt something." And I totally, I really hold that to my heart, because I think there's, you don't want to just be another brewery that you try something, you go, yep, and then you just sort of move on. It's just, I want you to feel something when you drink this, or remember something about it that you like or you didn't like. Just feel something, think something,
It's a great tagline, drinks to make you feel something.
I'll take it.
I know in the other videos we've been chatting about your work with curation and building, putting this calendar together. Why did you decide to include this bit?
I've loved pretty much every release I've had from these guys. It was one of the first one actually was the Harvest in the Big Sim 50s, right? And that was a fresh hop beer. And that was phenomenal. And then sort of tried to get my hands on everything since. And this originally came out in bottles last year, I think, possibly the year before. And it was lovely. That honey sort of allows it to ferment out slightly drier, but still give it a kind of floral character. And then New Zealand hops doing what they do, and a bit of that sort of deep, funky kind of barrel character. It's just a perfectly put together beer. So when we spoke earlier in the year and you said you might have a barrel coming ready around Advent time, I was very keen to sort of make it happen. I'm glad the barrel was ready in time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so it's a sort of classic saison. It was traditionally a beer that was made for saisonniers or seasonal workers. It was just something that the seasonal workers, while they're working, could crush at lunch to hydrate themselves for the afternoon. So yeah, mostly sort of like a Pilsner-based beer, barrel fermented with wildflower honey, just buckets of wildflower honey. So you get this sort of cool, dry, yeah, you're right, sort of very spicy, sort of complex character from all the honey. It's very meaty. And then, yeah, dry hopped with New Zealand Cascade and Waiti, just to give it those nice, big tropical sort of hop aromas on the nose. Yeah. But, yeah, no, I think it's, thank you for reaching out.
I think with a few honey beers and a good amount of mead, and when people first drink honey beers, they often think it's going to be sweet and taste like honey, and obviously that's exactly not what happens, because the yeast eats all the sugar and turns it into alcohol.
Yes.
But I am getting real honey character in this.
Yeah.
Which obviously it must have been a very flavoursome honey. It's not the sweetness. It's the just the flavour of honey from all those wildflowers.
Yeah.
Really noticeable.
Yeah, absolutely. The hives sit right under this big manuka tree, but obviously that's not the only place. The bees, they're very tenacious, and they'll forage anything that they can find, from like kilometers away. So they'll really search. Yeah, busy bees, as they say. So they are probably pulling a lot from those manuka trees and manuka branches, like all around us in the sort of the Bronte Peninsula and in Nelson. But yeah, big, rich sort of floral, sort of spicy honey character. But just, when you pull all that sugar out, what you really do see how sort of interesting and floral and spicy honey is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell us for a minute about your barrels?
Yeah, so obviously being having a wine label as well gives us the access to a lot of wood. So they're all French oak. We use either 225 litre barrels or 500 litre barrels.
Yep.
It's more we're just sort of trying to just constantly keep them full and keep them hydrated. So for us, there's no real specific idea of what type of beer is going to go into like what type of barrel or anything. We just sort of want to keep everything full. But yeah, it's all just sort of French oak. Most of them have been wine barrels for a couple of years, and then we moved them into the brewery. We just like to keep the wine barrels a little fresh, so yeah, you can use slightly older oak in barrels for beer. That's why you see sherry cask beers and you see bourbon cask beers. It's
Another use.
Exactly, yeah. The beer usually does sort of get dropped a little bit further down the priority line when it comes to oak. But I think what you want is that nice sort of micro-oxidation and texture that oak offers beer, rather than this sort of tight, toasty barrel character. So yeah, that's what we want it for. We want to build that sort of texture into the beer.
And that's your house character, I suppose, like those old Burton sets. You know about those? And there's a few breweries around the world that do. There's one in Hopeful in Scotland that I've only had a couple of beers, but I actually love the idea of fermenting and using barrels in many ways. And so for the homebrewers watching, so are you talking about aging in barrels or actually fermenting in the barrels?
Both, yeah. So some of the beers will ferment in barrel and then we'll pull them out into a tank. Some of the beers will ferment in a tank and then we decide to move it to a barrel. And then some of them, barrel fermentation and then barrel aging as well.
So that's simply you pour your wort into a barrel and just slap an airlock in.
Exactly. Yeah. We put they're called a bung. It's just like a big rubber stopper. It's got a hole through the middle, and then we'll put a big hose out into a big bucket of sani. Then so all the oxygen just goes. I guess the same as you have with
a jumbo bubbler for homebrew.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's the same thing. Yeah. And then post fermentation, we play around a lot with leaving some barrels topped up, and some we leave on ullage, which is like not topping the barrels after. We had a really good conversation with a brewer just based out of Vermont, and he said that experimenting with leaving beers on ullage was a very sort of groundbreaking thing for him in terms of the development and like the aging of the beer. So we said, don't try not to top everything and try and leave some things on ullage, and those beers might evolve a little quicker or a little slower, but they will just be different. And it's just, they're really nice for blending components just to have that difference.
As the wood in the barrel dries out, would that not shrink and have leakage?
That would only really be, you're probably only talking about that sort of top 30 litres.
Not letting the whole barrel dry.
No, sorry, yeah. So it's just after fermentation, you want to leave a little bit of space at the top because it will spew a lot of good yeasty stuff. So it's about trying to get allowing that space for fermentation. And then post fermentation, we usually will use a tank beer to sort of top it up, or we'll just leave it how it is. And obviously not opening the bung and constantly pulling samples. We just put a nail in the front of the barrel, and we just pull the nail out with a hammer, and pull a little sample, and then sani the hole and sani the nail and knock the nail back in.
And what about your yeast?
So a mixture. So we have some beers that we add yeast culture, and some that we have wild fermented. Usually for the re-fermentation, so a lot of the fruit beers and stuff, with the natural yeast and bacteria that's on the fruit is enough to sort of get the fermentation going. Obviously for your pilsners and your lagers and stuff like that, those cold fermented beers, we do pitcher yeast. But most of our saisons and stuff, there's already such healthy bacteria inside those barrels that most of them are just going to kick off very happy on their own. So some of our beers are a little bready, some of our beers have lactobacillus. It's going to be a mixed bag in there, but those are all the fun things,
the way it used to be for homogenization.
Exactly.
Over all the fun. And the wonderful that I remember years ago learning about and tasting that the cultures and yeast that exist on fruit taste of the fruit.
Absolutely.
And can enhance the flavors. And a friend of mine had homebrewed a beer using a yeast that he cultured from a cherry. And there was no fruit in the beer. It was a saison that had a distinct cherry character. Wild how nature works like that.
They're exploring that a lot in coffee as well with co-ferments. So when they add the coffee cherries or the processed beans to a tank to ferment, they'll add in some fruit, and then that co-fermentation ends up kicking a lot of that fruit flavor into the coffee bean itself. Just from the yeast kind of getting to work. So I think natural process coffee instead of wash.
All right, well, I think that's the gem of an idea that may one day turn into a Small Gods Brewed collaboration. Some coffee cherries on the go.
I do remember we had a beer called Fijao Rye, and that beer was a yeast prop using manuka branches, which were just on top of the, or sort of hanging around the beehive. We just cut a bunch of those, and those are just covered in microflora and bacteria, and you truly just pull a bit of unfermented wort into a demijohn and just stuff it with manuka branches or bark off vines or whatever, and you just put it in, and that sort of just starts fermenting in this demijohn of unfermented wort, and that's it. That's the start of your yeast culture. You tip that in your barrel, and off you go.
So are you sort of embracing sort of modern technology and microscopes and the laboratory and things as well? Are you like looking at seeing how the yeast is going under the microscope, or is it farmhouse style?
It's more farmhouse style for sure.
Good,
I think Lauren has had a little bit more practice and understanding of those things.
Of course.
With yeast and yeast populations. I come from a wine background, and all the wines I've ever made have always been wild fermentation. So it's based on that thing of natural yeast in on the grapes, because of organic farming allows you to make healthy wild fermented wines. So I've never looked at anything under a microscope. I know Lauren has. But as well, it doesn't cost much to try and start a yeast prop. I think if you want to try it out, just give it a go and smell it and taste it. It's not gonna make you sick or anything. If it smells delicious, put it in your next beer.
I think that is a thing that these days, again, talking about industrialization of everything in our food, that so many people are like scared that food comes in packets and that you bought something from the supermarket and it says eat within 3 days, and on day 4 it goes in the bin.
Yeah.
No, just smell. Is it okay?
Yeah.
It's kefir yogurt. It's probably fine.
Yeah. I never look at that milk date. No.
This is not official health advice.
No. Yeah.
But it's natural food has that built in.
Yeah.
If something smells gross, don't eat it. If it's a pear and it's floppy and it's rotten with a maggot in it, don't eat it. But you don't need a use by date on a pear in your fruit bowl.
Yeah, for sure.
And the same as if you're making sourdough cultures at home, if it's gone off, it's gone off.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
healthy. And the same with fermenting, whether it be sauerkraut or wine or beer.
Totally. Yeah, our noses are good,
It's not a scary thing. You don't need to be an expert. Obviously, there's nuance, and you
Yeah,
gain experience.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And the label artwork's really cool.
Thank you.
How did that come about?
That's all Lauren.
Yeah.
Lauren does all of the design work and art for the brewed fermentation beers. I think
Talented
it's
woman.
Yeah. She's pretty good. She's a ceramic artist. She's a brewer. She does it all. I think it's really for her. It's like a synesthesia thing. It's we do usually post fermentation, secondary fermentation in the can to make it fizzy.
Yeah.
We do let them age a little bit longer cold, just to sort of allow the aromatics and the palate to sort of come back together. They get a little bit shaken up during that carbonation process. And it's really a synesthesia thing for her. She just tries it and she says, like, this is what it smells like, this is what it tastes like. These are the colours I'm seeing, I think it's an Ozzy Osbourne song, actually. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we need to ask her what soundtrack we should be listening to while we do this as well, I suppose.
Yeah, probably, yeah. It's pretty psychedelic looking at it, so I don't know. Yeah.
So, your place, you can't visit there, you haven't got a tap room. Right?
No, it's all just a production space. It's a small 5-barrel direct fire system.
Yeah.
So it's no steam or electronics. It's all LPG gas and flame.
Beautiful.
But yeah, no, it's out on a farm, out of an old winery, out in Brightwater, which is maybe half an hour from Nelson.
What is happening in 2025 for brew?
2025,
and onwards.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think more of the same things. I think just try and stay curious and try and keep pushing and try and connect with other small organic like orchards and things like that to try and get more alternative fruits.
Yep.
Some of the beers that we were brewing from the very start that have been aging for 3 years now are going to start coming out next year. So some 3-year-old spout beers and 3-year-old hazelnut beers are going to be coming out in 2025. So some of our older stuff, and then I think probably more dark beer. I think Lauren and I are really enjoying good, clean, sort of those like dark ales, those sort of 5%. Who doesn't love a Guinness, And not saying that we're going to do a nitro beer, but a good, just dry, dark beer. It always goes down well. So probably a couple of those.
Very nice. Amazing. Oh, thanks so much for coming along and sharing your beer with us.
Yeah.
Hopefully, everyone drinking along at home has had as good a time as I have.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been brilliant. Oh, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the support.
Cheers.
Thank you, Beer Jerk. Thank y'all. Merry Christmas.
I'm excited to drink more of your beers in 2025.
Hell yeah, sounds good.
See you tomorrow.